say this before I forget. My grader got upset about the papers she was looking at. I had to talk her down off the ledge. Quite a few people turned in stuff that was misspelled, ungrammatical, and if you can't write a page or two of grammatical English, you really should fix that. It will greatly impair your career, and so I would recommend you get Grammarly. I understand you have to pay for it to get the full value, but I wouldn't be shy about doing that. This is what most people say really helps them. If you are not good at writing proper English sentences, you should really use some technology to help you, and this is the most popular one I know of, although if you have something else, use that. But, that's all we're looking for in these papers is something that reads as grammatical English for a page or two. And quite a few of them did not meet that standard, so you should use a technological product like this to improve your writing if you don't already know how to write a couple pages of grammatical English. Anyway, now let's go back to the slides. So VPNs, we all know about these. I think we all have to use them at every job for a good reason. So the point of a VPN, back in the old days, you would just make a dial-up call to your workplace and pay a long-distance fee, and then you would have your own wire all the way that was not shared with anybody else. And that was a private network for all practical purposes, but now all calls are routed over a shared network, so that's no longer true, especially if you go over the internet. So the point of a VPN is to create a secure link as if you had your own long Ethernet cable getting to work. And so that's hopefully done with encryption. So you'd have, now in the old days, there was SLIP, which would just route the data to the destination over the internet protocol, but it did not add any encryption. Point-to-point protocol added these things to it. And then PPTP was the first really popular VPN protocol of the modern type. It's built into all Windows systems by default, and it passes things through port 1723, and it's encrypted, but the encryption is not very strong, and it's pretty easy to hack into. I give it to my ethical hacking students as homework. So this is one of those old encrypted protocols that is not really safe enough to use anymore and should be avoided. It's better than no encryption at all, but it's not good encryption. L2TP is a product that routes data but does not provide any encryption, but if you combine it with IPsec, L2TP/IPsec is considered a very strong VPN, right up to modern networks. So IPsec is considered very strong, but it's extremely complicated, far more complicated than it should be. It has, and it uses these goofy protocols, Protocol 40, 50, and 51, which are not TCP or UDP, and are often not allowed at home routers, which is kind of a defect. And it has a lot of complicated details. Now you can make it from a host to a gateway, like a client, or gateway to connect one location of your company to another, or even host to host. And it's got tunnel and transport mode. In the tunnel mode, the entire packet is stuck inside another packet. And in transport mode, it puts the data in there but keeps the old IP header. In practical terms, there's not a much difference between them. All right. But anyway, IPsec is considered strong, kind of complicated to set up. TLS is a perfectly fine thing to use for a VPN, where you make it basically an HTTPS connection and put your data over that. And that's, of course, much simpler to use. It's what your browser uses all the time. SSL was the early protocol before TLS, and no version of it is safe. Nobody should be using any version of SSL. We should all be using TLS, of which there are several versions, all pretty good. And then there's remote access. If you want to connect to your machine from a distance, ISDN was one way to do it, the old digital service over copper wires. DSL is the one I was looking for before. This is the most common one people use to get internet service these days. It just encodes packets over a normal phone line in a very compressed way, so it can get pretty fast. But you have to be near to a major phone switching station to get speed out of it, so it only works in cities. If you're out in the country, DSL is not going to work. Cable modems are the same story. It works fine if you have cable, but if you're out in the country, they won't bother digging a tunnel and putting cable out to you. So you'll have to use one of Elon Musk's satellites or something. So some of the security measures. One trick people did before, which is you would call to request that the data center calls you. It will then call you at your known phone number. So it won't, if you're somebody else, not the real employee, you won't get that call. This is actually a pretty good system, but it relies on the old idea that you're at home and you're not like traveling in a coffee house or something. You could use caller ID, but that's a pretty bad idea because it's very easy to spoof caller ID. It's like the from email address. You can change it to anything you want. So it doesn't really prove that you're that person. Anyway, remote desktop console access, where you're going to remote control a computer over the internet. Unix used rlogin and RSH. These were unencrypted protocols. The modern replacements are VNC and RDP. These both let you have a graphical desktop on a remote machine. VNC is typically used on Unix systems and RDP on Microsoft Windows systems. RDP is in fact a licensed version of Citrix. So go to my PC and log me in are other ways to do this. And the thing about these is they will connect to a server and then pass your data through a server, so everybody can have the Windows firewall turned on and just be a client only. All right, so you can have a virtualized desktop infrastructure where your entire desktop, your documents, your desktop, your installed programs and everything are all running on a server, and your computer is just being used as sort of a display screen to see what's happening on the server. This is very popular, especially during the pandemic. One of the enterprise people that gives guest lectures says, I'll hire people right away if they know how to set this up on Azure. This is what we want. Everybody will have all their company data on the Azure infrastructure, and they're just viewing it through their computer, so we don't have to like trust any of our company data on people's home machines. You can also virtualize just an application like Microsoft Word or something, and then they're using Word on the server, but other things are actually running locally. Screen scraping is one technique to draw the screen. This is what VNC does. It sends graphical images of what the screen should look like to you. RDP doesn't work that way. In my experience, VNC works pretty badly. It gives you like gaps in the screen and stuff, and it's pretty frustrating to use. RDP works a lot better. Then there's real-time chat. Been around forever. Internet relay chat was used in the days when people would share a common Unix server at a company and they would send text messages back and forth. Pixel streaming and screenscaping. I'm not sure what pixel streaming is. I don't know the answer to that. Anyway, you have to Google that one, I guess. Anyway, so IRC has been around for a long time, and a lot of malware uses IRC, but it's a way to send text chat for people. Yeah, Slack is color-coded IRC. Yeah, you could look at it that way. Anyway, AOL Instant Messenger was a popular one at one time. I don't know if anybody still uses it. ICQ also. Jabber was out there. All these things were really popular in like the 90s, and a lot of them used sleazy chat clients with code injection and vulnerabilities and other things, and you could share files over them. So although they were popular, they were considered security risks. And Unreal Engine, oh my. Pixel streaming, somebody did look up pixel streaming, all right. Anyway, then there's this meeting technology like Zoom that people use. GoToMeeting, Microsoft Live Meeting. Now I think they call it Microsoft Teams or something, the latest version. And anyway, these things can be used sometimes to remotely control a machine, mostly for things like this where you're presenting something. They had these personal digital assistants at one time. Now it's all just portable cell phones have turned into this. And BlackBerry is pretty much gone. Everything is just iPhone and Android these days. All right, good. Anyway, as soon as these portable devices came out, we got the major security issues, which is that people are going to be taking them places, infecting them with stuff, losing them, and you'll have company data on them. So you have to have some kind of lock, and it would be good to have them encrypted and have some kind of remote wipe so you can try to clean off that data. And they should be using secure wireless connections, would be a lot better. wireless access protocol is a technique that was used to deliver services over web network to handheld or smartphones based on TLS. And there was a thing called WAP that would ran a microbrowser. This thing is pretty much obsolete. It seems to have been gone for almost 10 years now. And then, of course, content delivery networks like Cloudflare, Akamai, and Amazon CloudFront. If you have a web server and you have customers all over the world coming to the web server, it's a lot better to have a local copy of the web page near them, so you can service that traffic quickly near them. And this decreases the load on your server. It makes it harder for attackers to reach your server and so on. So these make your server stay up longer, and they make it have less total bandwidth and processing required and give a faster response to your customers. So these are extremely popular. This led to the entertaining Netflix, of course, also uses it. Oh, one thing that's funny is in the days of like Windows 2008, Microsoft used Akamai. So if you would like scan the Microsoft server, it would tell you it was Linux. And people said, Microsoft is serving their stuff on Linux. And that was sort of true, but it was sort of not true. And Microsoft felt like they were getting a bad rap. Their proxies from Akamai were running on Linux. But anyway, all right. So let's take a look at the last Cahoots. What would be your best defense if you use a chat service? I would say put it over a VPN. That's sort of the global solution for everything. Put it over a VPN will help. And then update it, whatever it is. Use a modern one that is updated so that you hopefully get the buffer overflows and such out of it. Those would be ways to make it better. Well, yeah, anything you put in a browser should be TLS. Most browsers will warn you now if you don't use TLS. Any kind of plain text in a browser is not considered wise anymore. Yeah, the Linux versions of these chat clients are often pretty lame. You can get a Mac. Macs are basically Linux that works, Unix that works. Well, you know, Macs are awfully close to a Linux desktop. It's technically Unix, but it is pretty much, I think, the ultimate Linux desktop, really. What's funny is to see Richard Stallman give a talk. I saw him give one at Hope, and he has this little tiny laptop, and he's holding it up, wavering, and they're approaching a camera on it because he can't connect it to any projectors or anything because he runs Linux. So nothing works, you know. It's pretty hilarious. Anyway. Well, you know, Linux did win. We're almost all using Linux now. We're using iPads and iPhones and Macs and Androids, and they're all running Linux and Unix. So it won. It just wasn't the free version of it that won. Yeah. The main reason to live on Linux is because you want to become a Linux expert, and it will force you to practice Linux. That's my feeling. It'll be much harder to get your ordinary things done, but you'll become a real Unix expert or Linux expert. Anyway. All right, so which one gives you transport but no encryption? That's L2TP, Layer 2 tunneling protocol. Which one is old and unsafe? Yep, that's PPTP. Which one runs over port 3389? Yep, that's RDP. Yeah, I was real. I used to write the homework for people to set up PPTP. Then it got hacked. Anyway. All right, so what's the instant message system? It's been around since the 80s. Yep, that's IRC. And by the way, Linux on the desktop, don't forget Chromebooks. A whole lot of devices are really running Linux. It's just not the free type of Linux you're thinking of. Anyway. All right, that's VoIP. And LEWI. And 1, 2, 3. All right.